What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my AEW Collision audio review for November 11th, 2023. I am Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well, having a great weekend so far. No Collision review last week, busy last week, not really an overly eventful episode anyway. Neither was this one. They filmed this before, or rather after Rampage on Friday night, which they taped live, and I actually enjoyed Rampage on Friday for a change. Maybe it was the live atmosphere or the more meaningful matches. We didn't really get a whole lot of that on this show, and they probably did that by design, knowing it would be a tape show. But the fact of the matter is, Collision really hasn't been an overly exciting show in a while. And it'll have its rare episodes in the last month or so where it's more eventful than usual and there's some big matches like MJF and Kenny Omega, the show that I was at. But really beyond that one match, I was there 2 weeks ago, couldn't really name many other matches that happened on that show unless I really thought about it. I remembered being there for MJF and Omega. I thought the match on this show, the main event with Copeland and Allin and Sting taking on Vincent and Dutch and Lance Archer, was a very good main event, and the opener was also enjoyable. The overall show felt like a 2-hour Rampage. I can't say that I hope this doesn't become the norm. I don't, but at the same time, it feels like it already has. It feels like we're already in a spot in the last couple of weeks, and again, I've come on here week after week, oh, it's a better show than usual, it's a worse show than usual. Shit will fluctuate. It's just not consistent. I mean, that's the nature of wrestling shows. Raw one week will be great, one week it'll be boring. Same thing with SmackDown, NXT, Rampage, Dynamite. Collision is no exception, obviously. But it feels like we're getting to a point where it really isn't destination must-see programming. And there's a reason why I never really reviewed Rampage here on the channel, because it was never really all that meaningful beyond the first month or so. We're now almost 5 months into Collision. The first 2 or 3 months were great. In the last 2 months, it kind of feels like just another show. Will I continue reviewing it going forward here on Sundays? For now, I will, because I'm just a routine person like that. Saturdays are SmackDown, Sunday is Collision. For right now, I will, but we'll reevaluate probably in the new year to figure out if we're still going to be, if it's still worth really reviewing the show. Because I thought this episode was kind of boring overall, had some good stuff and quality in-ring action. The fact it wasn't live obviously didn't help, but it's not like this is a 1 week thing where it was not good just because it was taped. One of those first few Collisions actually was taped. I think it was like the second or third episode, and it wasn't great. That was one of the weaker shows they had done up to that point, and this being another one, but it's not like the show normally is all that exciting beyond like 1 or 2 matches on the show. I enjoyed Dynamite most weeks more than Collision at this point. Rampage is also hit or miss. That's been the same way for a while now. I'll never really review Rampage here on the channel just because it's not really worth it, but we'll see. I'll very likely review it next week. It's not going to be airing on Saturday, obviously due to Full Gear. So what they're doing, I found out today, is that they're actually taping Rampage and Collision in the same day on the same night next week, and they're airing both live. So I guess Collision's going head-to-head with SmackDown next Friday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and then Rampage is airing afterward at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So it's basically like, and that sounds like a lot of fucking wrestling, and it is. First of all, they had done that with this show. They taped Rampage, then Collision. So the crowd in attendance sat through like 3 hours of wrestling. Probably more if they had taped a dark match or had gone longer or whatever, because just because it's a 2-hour show doesn't mean it's 2 hours in the building. It could be shorter, it could be longer. Nonetheless, they've done that before, but it also feels like one of those Rampage, or rather Collision and Battle of the Belts combinations, because they've done that before too, where they'll have Battle of the Belts right after Collision or right after Rampage, and it's like 2 or 3 hours of wrestling. So that's not really out of the ordinary for AEW. It's not a 3-hour Raw necessarily, and they're not always bad. I can't imagine they're going to be overly exciting next week, a day before Full Gear. Hopefully by that point they have the entire card set in stone. They're not adding any last-minute matches. This is AEW we're talking about, so I'm not overly optimistic. But I will try to review the show probably first before SmackDown. I'll save the SmackDown review for Sunday. And possibly, that's a big if, do a Collision review before Full Gear on Saturday, so time will tell. But yeah, let's get into it here. We open up the show, Daniel Garcia versus Andrade El Idolo. A very good match here, I thought. One of the better parts in the entire show. The gimmick of CJ Perry right now is that she's not managing Miro. And honestly, so when I'd already known that CJ Perry, the former Lana, would be managing Andrade on the show. When I had seen the gif of her coming out with Andrade on Twitter, I'm thinking, oh, like great, they're reunited. completely forgetting they were never actually an item or appearing on any show to begin with. I'm thinking of Andrade and Zelina and CJ and Miro. For whatever reason, I probably just get them mixed up because they were always in the same spot on the card in WWE. They were always like at the United States Championship level, both having a manager, kind of having around the same success. Probably Miro more than Andrade. Miro was at least involved in a couple big WrestleMania matches. Andrade never really was. But anyway, CJ's managing Andrade for right now. It was successful here, so I see it sticking, at least for right now. Miro was shown afterward, after Andrade won. He was shown smiling backstage. So either he's linking up with them, or he's just happy for CJ. It's a weird dynamic, but we'll see where they go with it. I enjoyed the match, though, following up Garcia's performance against MJF for the AEW World Championship on Wednesday. With another loss on Saturday is not ideal, first of all. I know AEW and WWE's done this a lot too. Well, the whole idea is, if they look good in defeat, they'll gain a lot from that performance. That is true, but when you do it a lot, they just look like losers. I mean, Garcia's only won one singles match in 6 months, that being against fucking Trent Beretta on Rampage a week ago. The guy needs to win more meaningful matches on his own. Matches, period, really, singles matches on his own. He hasn't really won any singles matches at all, aside from that one match last week. So, it's not exactly, again, like I said, ideal to have him lose here. He was never going to win, and I thought it was a really good match. But hopefully coming out of this, they can start having him win matches if they really want to start focusing on him. And I'm hoping that's the plan. I mean, they're giving him more television time and focusing on the fact that he's getting over with the audience with the dumb dance. And they can break him off on his own finally, which is what they should have done a year ago. But better late than never, I guess. Better late than sticking it, or keeping him, rather, with the former Jericho Appreciation Society rejects. So we'll see how that kind of pans out. So after that, we had Nick Wayne taking on Dalton Castle. The crowd was fucking quiet for this. Maybe they would have been a little bit louder if this was a live show and they didn't just tape Rampage. I like Dalton Castle a lot. Nick Wayne is better in the heel role as like the underdog plucky babyface thing he was fine at, but he always lost, so there was never really any reason to take him seriously beyond being Darby Allin's buddy. In the past heel role, he's good. It's pretty clear, though, they only gave him this win, which might have been the first televised singles win he's had in AEW, because he's lost a lot so far in the company, at least on AEW programming, maybe not so much on Ring of Honor TV. But he won here. It's pretty clear they only gave him this win, so it will mean a little bit more when he gets pinned in that six-man tag team match next Saturday at Full Gear, when he, Christian Luchasaurus, take on Adam Copeland, Sting, and Darby Allin. So the match was fine. The crowd was very quiet. They really had no reason to care. Nick Wayne is not over. Dalton Castle is not a regular on these shows. He's an enjoyable act. I enjoy Castle, but he's never really on AEW television. And I thought the timing sucked because I know it was taped Wednesday. This was taped on Friday. But Castle is actually challenging Eddie Kingston for the Ring of Honor World Television, or not even the TV title. That title's in the fucking trash right now because Samoa Joe vacated it on Wednesday's Dynamite. He's challenging Eddie Kingston for the World Championship in Ring of Honor next Thursday. Again, the match was taped on this past Wednesday, just due to the fact that's how the tapings kind of shook out this week. But I just thought it was dumb they would have Castle go in there and lose this random match to Nick fucking Wayne if they're going to have him challenging for the Ring of Honor World Championship in like 4 or 5 days. Not like anyone cares, not like Tony Khan even cares, but I thought it was worth noting. They had a match after, or actually a promo from Adam Page, I should mention this, challenging Swerve Strickland to a match of Full Gear, which we already knew about, that was actually already set in stone. He challenged him to a Texas Death Match, which was then made official in the subsequent match on commentary by Tony Khan. Tony Schiavone informed us of that, but it's going to now be a Texas Death Match, which is the perfect stipulation coming off the angle they ran on Wednesday's Dynamite with Page putting him through the table off the stage. Great spot. It would be even more meaningful if they didn't do that stipulation as much as they already do. I feel like we've already seen, and they call it different things sometimes, but we've already seen at least 2 different Texas Death Matches this year. If we haven't, then I might be just imagining things. We see so many hardcore matches in AEW, so many of them blend together, that the stipulations are just hard to give a shit about. But it should be a great match, though. Their first match was great. The rematch should hopefully be no different. I do expect Adam Page to go over, but at least Swerve won in his hometown at Wrestle Dream the first time, so there is that. We left Faccion Ingobernable taking on the Workhorsemen. It was Rush and Realistico representing La Faccion Ingobernable. Well-worked match here. The Workhorsemen are quality wrestlers, obviously. They never fucking win anything, but this was pretty much a showcase for LFI. And we found out actually later on in a backstage interview with Ricky Starks and Big Bill that I was wondering, like, what are they doing with the tag titles of Full Gear? Are we getting Ricky Starks and Big Bill against LFI, and then FTR against House of Black? I'm glad they're just putting them all together in a Fatal 4-Way tag team match, and as opposed to doing 2 separate tag team matches, which is what they would ordinarily do. And I know we got on pay-per-view last year and maybe the year before a lot of multi-team matches for the tag titles that were just not necessary. And it is lazy, but at the same time, I feel like all these teams have been feuding now for the past month. It actually is a match that makes sense. It's not a random, like, oh, these matches we have qualifiers to determine, like, why do we need a Fatal 4-Way? On this show, we need a Fatal 4-Way because they're all feuding anyway. So I actually like that. We had Julia Hart, actually that was a little bit later on. We had her on a promo earlier in the show after we heard from House of Black and they taunted LFI. So we'll get to Julia Hart's promo, or rather her match, a little bit later on. We had Roderick Strong in a match with Darius Martin, his first match in a while. Obviously not actually her, but he will sell it as if he is with the neck brace and whatnot. Roddy's great. I'm glad we're finally getting progression with this. I've said before, not to sound like a hypocrite, I am enjoying the Strong stuff overall. The screaming, the incessant screaming from the fucking chair was so bad towards the end, and it has been. I mean, they just keep doing it with no real progression. That was my biggest issue with the storyline, was that they really weren't progressing anything forward. Now that Strong is wrestling again, that's actually progression. So I enjoy that. I appreciate that. We have progression now with Strong facing Darius Martin, beating him here in equality. Well worked. Nice little sprint of a match. So that was good. We still need him actually in something of note at some point coming up soon, whether it be facing MJF or the Kingdom going for the Ring of Honor World Tag Team titles. Like, they're really dragging this thing out. And no, I don't think Roddy is the devil, the guy in the devil mask. That would be dumb anyway. They just kind of need to move their thing forward because it kind of feels like they're treading water right now. But for right now, it's entertaining when he can kind of do other stuff beyond just sitting there in a chair and screaming. That just kind of gets old very quickly. In between all of the matches, we didn't really have any in-ring promo segments on the show, aside from one Don Callis promo that I'll get to. But we did hear from Tony Khan and Bryan Danielson actually backstage, and this was kind of the surprise of the show. We're going to be getting a Continental Classic tournament, they're calling it. It's a round-robin tournament. So basically AEW's version of the G1. The G1 coming to AEW because Danielson can't work the G1 in New Japan. He has said before in other interviews, even recently, that it just wouldn't be feasible to go over there for a long period of time, especially now as he winds down his full-time career and he wants to be a dad and be home and not be on the road all the time. So they're bringing the G1 to Bryan Danielson. I don't know if any New Japan guys will be involved. I don't think so. I just think it's wild that we went from literally 2 weeks ago being told on commentary, Danielson's hurt. He's going to be out until the end of the year. It's November 12th, and the guy's already wrestling again. I'm not saying he's wrestling on Dynamite, but he is competing in this Continental Classic tournament. So he might have one of the last matches before they advance to the next round. He might not be wrestling until like the end of the month, but it's going to be happening on Rampage and Collision and Dynamite. That's cool. It gives fans something to look forward to. We don't know who else is going to be in it. I would hope it's actually top-tier athletes and not like fucking randos like Tony Nese and people like that. Like, actually put top talent in this thing and not people just in there to take a loss. Like, that's not exciting. That's not fun. 2 questions coming out of this. Again, the Bryan Danielson thing is great. Like, the fact he's not actually as hurt as they thought he was and he's going to be back a lot sooner than they thought. Like, he'll be wrestling very soon. If they're announcing him now, that tells me he'll probably be back in the ring for AEW before the month is through. So if that's the case, then why wouldn't he face Malachi Black at some point? That's my first question. Why is he not facing Malachi Black? I know he was injured by Okada on Dynamite, but he was actually legitimately injured in the match with Andrade 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it was 3 weeks ago. And they had a great match and whatever. But I thought they would blame that injury on Malachi, and they really haven't brought that up at all. Malachi's kind of focused on the House of Black FTR feud with LFI and Starks and Big Bill. He's actually competing in that tag team title match. It's not Brody King and Buddy Matthews. It's Malachi Black and Brody King. So they're actually not doing Malachi and Bryan Danielson at Full Gear. If he's not cleared for next week and he won't be back in the ring until the end of the month, that's fine. He had a giant fucking bandage around his eye here because he just had eye surgery like a week ago. That's one thing. Hopefully they don't forget about that and we can get back to Malachi and Danielson at some point because I was really looking forward to that. The second thing is, and also he's facing Okada on January 4th. That was made official a week or so ago. We challenged Okada to a rematch from Forbidden Door. We're getting it at Wrestle Kingdom. That's pretty awesome. So I'm looking forward to that. The second thing is, what is this tournament even for? I'm sure the matches will be great and they can label more matches, which they're already doing anyway on these shows. Like, for example, Andrade and Daniel Garcia. That probably would have been, if this was announced a month ago, a Continental Classic tournament match. And it wasn't on the show. It was just a nothing match. So slapping a label on it doesn't really make it that much more meaningful. It really doesn't. Especially without anything on the line. We've had so many fucking tournaments in this company this year alone. Like, we just wrapped up, not just wrapped up, but a couple of months ago, we had the Owen Hart tournaments and the Owen Hart Classics and whatever. The winners, Willow Nightingale and Ricky Starks, are on TV. They were on this show, but they're not really at the level that you would think they would be for winning that tournament. I mean, Willow, who did she beat? Ruby Soho, maybe, in the finals? I don't remember. I think she beat Ruby Soho. That might have been the semifinals, but she won the whole thing. And she's done nothing but lose since then. She's lost constant title shots. She lost on this fucking show. Ricky Starks has done well. He feuded with CM Punk, and he feuded with Danielson and did well and whatever. He really hasn't won a lot of meaningful matches. I mean, he's won half of the tag team champions, and that's great. But it's not like he's the TNT champion or in the main event scene or whatever it is. So again, if that didn't really accomplish anything, then why would we believe that this would accomplish anything either? So I'm not really sure what purpose this is supposed to serve. Tony Khan sure does love doing his tournaments, and it's a different type of tournament. This is better than them doing a full gear eliminator, which is what they've done the past 3 years for 2020, 2021, and 2022. We've heard nothing about that. We have 3 shows left. Unless they do it all next week, we're not getting that this year, and thank God, because last year they did it. Starks won, and they got the title shot at Winter's Coming, but the whole thing was really a waste of time. It was very rushed. No one really cared. No one probably remembers it. I'm glad they're not doing that this year. I'm not even really sure if they're doing Winter is Coming. They probably are, but I don't think I've heard anything about that. But what would make this any different, though? Unless there's a title shot at stake or something. So far, nothing, but maybe we'll find out in due time. Maybe it's an international, or is it the International Championship? Whatever they call that. The one that Orange Cassidy has. Maybe a shot at that. I don't remember. Or I'm not really sure, but I guess time will tell. We had Julia Hart against Willow Nightingale, and what I thought was actually a really good match. Very competitive. Julia's actually improved a lot. I was never really a fan of her work, but because she was always very limited in the stuff that we would see her do on Dark, because she wasn't really wrestling much, but God forbid you give her time. And some people, you give them more ring time, they're not going to get better. They're just not that good. She's the opposite, actually. I think the more time they've given her in the ring, she's actually improved with each outing. In the ring with people like Sky Blue, Willow Nightingale, who's very good, and even Chris Statlander, who's awesome. She's improved in the ring with each and every one of them. So she beat Willow here, rather. The whole idea was, and I don't really know why this was the case, if she could beat Willow, she would get another shot at the TBS Championship at Full Gear. So she's set in stone for that pay-per-view. I guess we're getting a match on Dynamite next week with Red Velvet and Sky Blue. And if Red Velvet can beat Sky Blue, or whoever beats who, will be added to the match. So it's going to be a 3-way at the pay-per-view. Willow's not even in the match. Hopefully it's Sky Blue because she's been a part of the storyline. I don't really care about Red Velvet. She just came back anyway. It would make way more sense for Willow to be in that match, to just make it a 4-way, but we already have a 4-way tag team title match, so they probably don't want to do 2 4-ways in the same show. I would rather have Willow in there instead of fucking Sky Blue, but, that's the story they're trying to tell right now. Chris Statlander, I think, has already beat all 3 of them. She's already beaten Sky, Willow, and Julia all one-on-one, so putting them in a 3-way might make things more interesting, but I thought this was a good match, though, between Julia Hart and Willow Nightingale. Powerhouse Hobbs had a quick squash against a gentleman, I believe by the name of Titus Alexander, beating him quickly. Very quick squash for what it was. We had Don Callis cutting a promo afterward, one of his usual rambling promos, really nothing out of the ordinary about it. But he did address and confront Paul Wight at ringside. He was sitting in on commentary for the match, kind of got in his face, threatening that Hobbs would take him out in that match next week, the 8-man tag team match on Dynamite, with the Don Callis family taking on Jericho and Omega. Not Takeshi. Takeshi's in the Don Callis family. Ibushi and Paul Wight. And I'm very curious to see what sort of or how much interaction we get between Hobbs and Wight, because they tease something here between the two. I'm sure they will do a spot, but it looked like Wight could barely even stand, let alone walk or even wrestle, a week or 2 ago when they showed him on Dynamite in the stage. So I'm very curious to see how that shakes out and what that match looks like and what Wight is even supposed to do. I think if they're calling it a street fight, it sounds like it's every man for themselves. So it's not even like Wight is tagging in and out. Maybe that will prove to be the case, But my understanding is that he's not tagging in and out. He'll just be there wrestling. So maybe Hobbs can take him out. Maybe he pins him. I don't know. Hopefully he puts him over. But I guess we'll find out. We get to the main event, Lance Archer and the Righteous Vincent and Dutch taking on Sting, Darby Allin, and Adam Copeland. Quality, enjoyable main event. Not really the right match to do right now, just because Archer and the Righteous just joined forces a week ago. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a cool little trio with Jake Roberts as their manager, who probably should not be out there at this point, but that's a cool little trio. And then they go in there and lose a week fucking later. Like, maybe they'll stick together, but if this was just a 1 week thing to have them lose to the babyfaces, I thought that was dumb. It seemed like the only reason this match was made and the only reason this match happened, and I enjoyed it for what it was a decent main event, was to keep people in the building, to kind of give them an incentive for staying through the Collision taping to watch Adam wrestle, because this was his in-ring debut on Collision. So if they didn't really have that incentive, people probably would have left a lot quicker. I didn't get a full scope of the arena, but it looked pretty full by the end of the show. So they were in there till the end. I was at Collision 2 weeks ago. I've been to Collision tapings where they tape Ring of Honor afterward. As soon as Collision is over, people fucking head right for the exit. And like well over half of the people in the building are gone for the Ring of Honor taping. And once that's over, there's barely anyone in the building. It's embarrassing. So at least with this, they kind of give people a reason to stick around. Oh, if you want to see Edge's first match in AEW on Collision, you'll stick around and watch it. And Sting as well. So it was a nice attraction. I enjoyed it for what it was. I don't like Archer and the Righteous losing already, but such is life. That's really the story of Lance Archer's AEW career. Winning whenever it matters most and really losing a majority of his matches instead of being protected more often. I thought the overall show was kind of boring, like I said. It was taped. You could tell the crowd was not excited for most of the show at all. You could tell they were exhausted by the end. It was a solid show. I thought it was going to be worse. I was not really overly into much of the show. But I liked the main event. I liked the opener. The tournament announcement was eventful, newsworthy, as was the tag team title announcement for Full Gear and the TBS Championship match being announced for that pay-per-view. So not a waste of a show, but I am hoping that we can get more consistency and exclusivity and stuff like that on the show going forward, so it's not just the same stuff from Dynamite spilling over onto Saturdays. I know you want to make it as meaningful as Dynamite, but at the same time, you do want a bit of, to me anyway, some stuff that is exclusive to Saturday, so it gives you a reason to want to watch. If it's just the same stuff from Fridays and Wednesdays, then what's the fucking point, you know? So hopefully they can get back to the show being a bit more must-see like it was a couple of months ago, but we'll see. If it's not, then I might not even really bother reviewing the show on Sundays anymore going forward. For now, I will, probably through the end of the year, and I will attempt to do a review next week on Saturday. I'm not sure. I might be busy. But since it's airing on Friday, I'll try to do the review on Saturday, and the SmackDown review will be bumped to Sunday, so keep an eye out for that. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.